Thanks for joining me today. My name's Jan Radu, and I'm bringing a card that has a few sneak peeks from the upcoming 21 to 22 annual catalogue. It launches on the 4th of May, and the first sneak peek product that I've got for you is the In Colour Designer Series paper. It's a 6x6 pad, and I'll just show you these fabulous new in colours for the next 2 years. So we've got soft succulent, pale papaya. This darker green is called Evening Evergreen. And then we've got polished pink, which you can see there is a variety of patterns in each colour. So there's polished pink, and then this gorgeous lilac is called Fresh Freesia, and I think that's probably going to be my favourite. So there's some 5 great new colours that's obviously available in a selection of products: pattern paper, matching ink, cardstock, embellishments. So check that out in the new catalogue. So I've decided on this Fresh Freesia print, and originally I was going to go with some soft succulent DSP, but as you'll see my process, I changed my mind. And this is the next sneak peek that I'm showing you, which is a new die set called the Basic Borders dies, and that just gives you a really nice decorative edge on your cardstock panel. And here's my Fresh Freesia stamp pad, and then the Evening Evergreen, which is fresh out of the box. So I'm just showing you my process of when I actually set the stamp pad up. So remove the wrapping, and I actually remove the entire label from the back because they actually stack better without that little bit of extra bulk on the back, and they do stack beautifully together. So I remove the entire label, and that leaves a nice clean finish on there. And then using your language of choice, so I'm pulling out the English label, and I'm just going to center that as best I can on the front of the stamp pad, and just be sure to press that down with your fingers so you get a nice seal. And then you see this little tip for opening the stamp pad. If you press your thumbs in the center of the top, they do just pop open nicely, and that really makes it so much easier to open. And I use the blank panel for inside, and that means when your stamp pads are open on your tabletop, you can actually see what colours they are, because some of the darker ones all look the same. So I just use I call this my pokey tool. It's a shish kebab, but you can use, you'll see I'll bring in later, a stylus. You can just use a stylus or something similar to push that label in place. I was debating on using some vellum in the card, but that got set to the side eventually as well. But I've decided on a Fresh Freesia and Evening Evergreen colour palette. Yep, so I went with the darker one. They contrast really nicely together. So that's 2 of the patterns you can see there that are in the Designer Series paper pack. So here I'm just trying to figure out exactly what my layout's going to be. So bringing in the paper trimmer, I've got some basic white cardstock, and I'm just trimming a small panel for the front of my card. All the measurements I'll pop down in the description of the video. So cutting that one to size, and then I will bring in the mini Stamp and Cut and Emboss machine, and I've got my plates going on in order. Now, just a tip: when you're actually lining up your plates inside this machine with the mini, it's really helpful to stagger the plates and not have them all lining up one by one as they go through the sandwich. It just makes it so much easier to roll through that way. So I've got a number 1 plate, I believe the white one is, and then number 2 cutting plate, and I'm just making my choice for the decorative finish. So adding my cardstock, lining up my die, and then adding the last cutting plate on top. And then I realized I was right-handed, so turning my machine around, and I'll run that one through too. You'll see that leaves a really nice edge on the cardstock. It's really quite detailed. You can keep the little offcut for a later project. And that's just one of the designs that are in that Basic Borders die pack. I'm going to cut my card front now, so bring in the Fresh Freesia DSP, and I'm just cutting that 10 centimeters to, I think it's 14.3, don't quote me, have a look in the description. And that's just my standard card front. You can see I've got a little bit of washi tape on my trimmer that tells me what this panel needs to be cut at, so I've just lined it up at the right measurement, and then I can just butt my DSP up against that and cut without having to measure. That's a really handy tip for you. And I've already packed up my in-colour cardstock into their plastic sleeves and labelled it with my labelling machine. So just cutting my card base now. So it's a standard A4 piece of cardstock cut in half. And then using the handy scoring blade on the paper trimmer just to score in half at 10.5 centimetres. Create a nice soft score line and then use the edge of the trimmer to fold that in half as well. It's always good to use a bone folder just to get a nice sharp crease on your card. It stays flatter that way. I'm bringing the lovely labels pick a punch and just quickly measuring again the size of the DSP that I need. So that's 1 inch for the largest design in this pick a punch. So I'm just going to cut a 1-inch strip from the Evening Evergreen DSP, and then I can feed that into the lovely labels punch and just making sure that it's also in line so that the pattern punches evenly. And lining that up on my card, I'm just looking for an indication of how long that piece of pattern paper needs to be. So I'll just bring a pencil in and make a small mark where I'm going to cut, keeping in mind that about 0.5 centimetre chops off when you pop it into the label punch. So I'm just marking it in line with the edge of that card layer, and I'll chop that and then pop it through the punch again. I know I'm going to lose 0.5 centimetre and it's going to end up around about the length that I need. So now I've got a really nice decorative edge on both sides, and when I lay that down, the card design is starting to come together. The welcoming window stamp set and matching dies are in the current mini catalogue, and they're carrying over into our brand new annual catalogue. I've been having a lot of fun with this stamp set. There's lots of different looks that you can get using different parts and elements. I'm pulling out this long sentiment and using my grid lines on my mat to make sure that sentiment is nice and straight, and then picking it up nice and straight on my block as well. I've brought in the piercing mat to make sure that when I'm stamping with my photopolymer, there's a bit of cushioning underneath and you get a better stamp that way. I'm inking that one up in Evening Evergreen. And when I put my stamp down, I'm not applying a really strong pressure, but I am leaving it connected to the paper for a couple of seconds, just allowing the ink to transfer. I love photopolymer because you can see exactly what you're going to get. And doesn't this green come up nicely? It's almost like a great alternative to using a black ink or a dark grey ink. I think it's going to be a great neutral actually. So I'm just cutting with my trimmer an angled edge on my sentiment piece. So I make my first cut and then I flip it around, and as long as I line that up with one of the straight measurement lines on the trimmer, the other edge is going to cut at the same angle. This is a great little tip that I did see another demonstrator use. I believe it was on a short video on Instagram. Works every time. So I love that angled look. You don't need a die, you don't need a punch, all you need is your paper trimmer. It's a great solution for all your long sentiments. I'm going for a bit of a non-standard stacking of all my pieces. If you've watched any of my videos, you'll know that I do labour a little on how I lay my card out. I've got the offcut from my front panel of fresh Freesia. I brought that into the mix as well. And I thought I might add that as a stacking element on the card too. So I'm just going to trim a little of that off. It's a little long for what I need. So I know I'm going to go with some of my, I think it's Artistry Bloom self-adhesive sequins. So they're in the current mini catalogue as well, available to order now, but they're also rolling over, which I'm so happy about because they're just so easy to use and they're in great colours. So I'm going to go with a flower pot for the front of the card. So I'm just selecting the matching leaves and the matching flowers. This is two-step stamping, and they are numbered on the stamp set, so you can see which ones go with which. And I'm choosing the largest pot to go with as well. And I've got all my stamps mounted on my clear acrylic blocks ready to go. So I'm going to use grey granite as my pot colour. So just ink that up and stamping with a nice firm stamp, again leaving it on the paper long enough for the ink to transfer. I like to do a couple just in case one is better than the other. I'm going with the evening evergreen for the leaves of my flowers. Making sure I've got enough ink coverage on my stamp before I stamp down. How great is that colour? I actually ended up using the second set of pot and flowers for the inside of my card. So it's always handy to stamp another set while you've got everything out. After stamping onto my fresh freesia, I'm just lining up with the open flower sections. Just doesn't have to be perfect. Matching the small one with the small space there and just wiggling it around until I'm fairly happy with the placement, and then I can press down. It's not quite perfect, but still looks very sweet. So when I do the next one, I just try and account for the slight misalignment on that one, move it just a little bit higher in the spaces. So I was happy with the placement of this one, but then I noticed that one of the flowers didn't quite stamp 100% clearly. So I'm just bringing in my blender pen, cleaning it off on some of the scratch paper there. And I'm just picking up a little bit of the fresh freesia ink onto the blender pen. And I'm just filling in the spots that didn't quite stamp. So this is a really good way to save something. If you've gone to a lot of effort and you've done a lot of stamping and there's a small bit that didn't quite stamp properly, you can just fill it in with your blender pen, let it dry, and you'll never know the difference. So I'm layering up my plates again, ready to die cut these flowers and the pots, using a little bit of washi tape. Try and take some of the stick off either on your clothes or on your skin before you use the washi tape, because it can tear the paper. Lining my die up. Once I've got it in the right placement, I will secure it with a little bit of washi tape. Any semi-permanent tape. Painter's tape works really well for this too, the blue painter's tape. Again, just put it on your clothing and take some of the sticky off first. Pop that one out. And I'm just rolling through, having done the same thing for the plant pot. And that's the staggering of the plates really does help with running it through. So if you're having trouble with that, definitely give that a go. I've torn a little bit of my stamping off with my washi tape on the plant pot, but I do fix that in the card at the end by adding a little bit of the Wink of Stella glitter pen, and that just smoothed it all over and actually gave the pot a really nice shine too. Bringing in some of my favourite products, which are our basic patterns decorative masks and our blending brushes. These masks are available. They're called the Basic Patterns in their new annual catalogue, but there's a brand new set as well, which I can't wait to get my hands on. And of course, the blending brushes, they come in sets of 3, and these are a great product. Really fun to work with. So I'm just bringing in some copy paper as my scratch paper and my white panel that I've already used those basic borders dies on. I'm just placing a spotty mask over the top. I'm just using some quick post-it notes to hold it in place, which didn't do a perfect job, but they were on hand, so I quickly grabbed those. And now opening my fresh freesia ink pad. I'm just going to bring in the blending brush and just add a little bit of ink to it. And when I start, I try and start off the panel and bring it in just so there's no harsh lines. And really with these brushes, it's just all about adding layers of colour, building up the ink until it's as dark as you like, I normally start with a bit of an abstract kind of shape. I wasn't sure where I was going with this, whether I was covering the whole lot or just a portion of the panel. So I lifted it up, and when I had a look, I decided I really wanted to do the whole lot. So I've just popped it back down and lined up the dots as best I can. And that gives me the chance to go over the areas that I hadn't already inked up. A light hand is definitely best. You can always add more colour. And I do go back and add a little bit more colour in some of the edges just to make it a little bit darker for a bit more interest. And now I've just added Stampin' Seal adhesive to the back of my DSP panel. I'm sticking that one down, just using some foam tape. You can use some Stampin' Dimensionals. And I'll use a variety of adhesives just to add different layers and dimension to my card. So I'm using some Tombow multi-glue to put the Evening Evergreen label down first. This glue is great because it is repositional, so once you've popped it down, you've got a bit of wiggling that you can do. I wasn't quite sure what angle I wanted, but you can easily straighten it up if you can move it around before the glue dries. So that's a really good glue, particularly if you're a beginner crafter. It's a really forgiving glue to use. Adding the second strip down with the same glue. And now I'm just using the edges of one of the dimensional sheets. And that just gives me a nice long strip to use. And that pops my sentiment up with a little bit of dimension. Don't waste any of that dimensional. Use every single bit before you throw that empty backing sheet away. Now I'm just adding some of the Artistry Bloom adhesive sequins, and that's my card finished for today. I hope you enjoyed those sneak peeks. There's lots of really nice products in the new annual catalogue. I'm sure you'll want to check that out. It'll go live on the 4th of May, so you can check stampinup.com.au or Stamping Elegance, my Instagram, and I'll have links to the new catalogue that you can follow. I'd love you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and thanks again for watching.